Hey guys, it's SD, your host of the Life Picks Relationship podcast, where people with all sorts of backgrounds, challenges, and life experience show us how they make their relationship extraordinary. Hey guys, we're here today with Carisa Montooth. How are you?
Good, thank you for having me.
So excited. You want to tell us a bit about yourself and what you do?
Yes, so I am a love coach and a sixth generation energy healer. And I live in Southern California with my husband and my daughter. My clients are single women who are really high vibe and really spiritually centered, and they want to date in a way that makes them feel confident and that makes them remember their value and who they are. And I'd love to work with them. And yeah, that's a little bit about me and what I do.
So awesome. It sounds like fun connecting with people on such a deep level like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's great.
So, what makes your relationship extraordinary?
Oh my gosh. So my husband, here's something that's kind of interesting is that my husband and I are very different in terms of the way that we look at the world, but we have a really deep appreciation for that difference, in each other. Like, for example, I am an energy healer and my husband is an atheist. So it's really interesting because he's like, I appreciate what you do and I can see that it makes a change for people, but we just look at the world in completely different ways. So it's kind of like, it's an interesting thing. Also, he's a musician, which I really admire. I haven't, really done anything musically since probably high school. So I'm probably like his biggest fan, but not a musician myself. And I think one of the things that makes our relationship really extraordinary is like we don't try to change each other. We're mostly just like, we've been married about almost 20 years now. And we really feel like we're still getting to know each other, like getting to know each other on a deeper level. Like last night we sat down and we were just talking about, these are the things I love about you. So I spent like 15 minutes just talking about things that I love about him from the time that I've met him, and things that just make him really special and unique to me. And then he spent like 15 minutes talking to me about those things. And then we were getting like, I just love you so much. We were just like getting really emotional about it and just thinking about how much we appreciate each other and how extraordinary it can be that, now, even though we're parents and even though we've known each other forever, I'm 43. We met when I was 17,
Wow.
yeah. We got married when I was 26. So, and there was a period of time between 17 and 26 that we weren't together, but we've been together so long, we've known each other that long. So it's really kind of like an extraordinary thing that we can both still be like, this is like a new level of you. Thank you for sharing this part of you with me.
Yeah. And I think that you could really only get there because you appreciate your differences so much. It doesn't get in the way that I think one way, you think a different way. So you see straight to it and you could get to the core and be able to see what you really appreciate in the other person.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because it
Yeah.
can be so tempting to try to just change somebody to make them more like you, or to see the difference as a problem. It's like it can be so tempting to do that. And
Yeah. So how do you see him differently now than when you met him at 17?
oh my gosh. So when when we were teenagers, like when I first met him, we worked at a sandwich shop together. And he was like the guy in the back, like slicing the meat and getting everything ready, and I was up in the front, one of the people up in the front. And he was just in the back singing at the top of his lungs, like singing police songs at the top of his lungs. you know, and when I first met him, I just thought like he was this tall, dorky guy in the back, that liked to sing police songs and just liked to work by himself and, stuff like that. And then the more that I got to know him, the more I knew that he was just this really good person, really a very like kind-hearted person with this optimistic view about the world and how important music really was to him and all these things that just like all this like richness of who he was, So like in the beginning, I thought he was kind of dorky, and he was one of my managers there, and he was very specific about things. So if I would make like a salad or something wrong, he'd be like, you've got to make that all over again. And I'd be like, are you serious? Those kinds of things. And now I really appreciate that about him. I appreciate that the way that his mind works, that he's so like, he has such a great ability to, like when we got married, we had all these wedding gifts, plus our honeymoon luggage, plus my giant dress. And we had to get it into a Ford Focus. And the way that his mind works is he stood on the curb and looked at everything for about 2 minutes. And then he was like, all right, I've got this figured out. And my instinct was to stand there and be like, maybe put this here and put this here, put this here. And I was like, no, I'm going to let him handle it. I turned around and I walked back inside. And 10 minutes later, I came out and it was all in there, because that's how his mind works. He can put things where they need to go. He can organize things. And that's why that whole thing with like, you got to remake that salad again was so important, you know, to him. It was like, things need to be done a certain way so that they work.
And I think this comes along together with appreciating the differences. You could have totally gotten into a fight with him about it, but instead he decided to give him the space and be able to do it because he has it figured out. So you work really well together now instead of fighting with each other.
That was one of the 2 moments that I actually realized emotionally that I was married. I remember
What was the other one?
the other one was I would have this habit of just like leaving the house and feeling like whatever I was going to do was so important that it didn't matter that I like locked the door behind me or something like that. And I remember there was one day that we were talking about that. He came home and he was like, hey, you left the door unlocked today. And I was like, oh yeah, okay. You know, I'll try to remember to do it. And he goes, well, we're married and that's your stuff and my stuff in there anyway. So I was like, oh my God. He's right. We're married. It's our stuff. You know,
Together, we're in this. Not just me and you.
I can't just be like carefree about this. Like, I have to be responsible.
Yeah. So what difference do you appreciate about him most?
Probably he thinks he's so good at preparing. We have different, like if we're going on vacation or something like that, I get excited about the experience. So I will be like looking for the right hotel, you know, and it'll be like, oh, it's got to be a hotel with a heated pool. And, you know, it's got to have a bathtub, you know, instead of just a shower. I'm thinking of things like that, like a big giant bed and what's it close to? And I'm like setting the stage for an experience. But by the time we get down to the car to actually go to the place, he's the one who's stocked the car. Like everyone has snacks. This is exactly where everything goes. Here's where we're going to stop on the way. Like he thinks about all the practical things. I'm fantasizing about the overall experience, you know, and he's like, we're going to stop for gas at these two places. And where he makes things happen, you know, he cares about the details of stuff like that. And
He's a big picture.
yeah, he's a big picture. And also I can see it in the way that we raise our daughter, because to me, her emotional world is probably my number one priority, is like her understanding how to deal with her feelings and that it's okay for her to feel everything she feels, and how to love herself and how to have boundaries and know that like you're not responsible for this other person and how they feel if you're, you know, treating them well and those kinds of things. So she can really have a lot of like skill for handling her emotions and valuing herself as she's getting older. So her inner emotional world is super important to me. And to him, what's the most important is like her being able to make good decisions and know the difference between right and wrong, and to be independent and to take the initiative to be responsible. Like those kinds of things are really important to him. So it's like this balance. If we were both the same, you know, she might be very good at following rules, but not understanding her feelings, you know, or vice versa.
That's awesome, because now she gets a wholesome raising. How's your relationship different now from when you met?
I think when we met, one of the things was, you know, you have this idea of how life is supposed to go. And it's like you meet, then you get married, and then you meet, you date, you move in together, you get married. It's kind of like this progression, right? And everybody thinks about it like, oh, that's just how it works. Like that's the same. And I think in the beginning, we thought of things like that. We thought this is what we're going to do and this is how everything's going to go. But then the longer that you're together, the more curveballs life throws at you. And the more you go, oh, we had this plan, but we have to adapt. And I think that getting to see how each other handles that's made a big difference, or that's been something that's really different. Is like in the beginning, we knew we loved each other. We knew we wanted to spend our lives together, but I don't think we knew how each other would handle changes and stress and having to course correct and stuff like that. We didn't know what that was going to be like. So that's been a big difference, is that like now we know that it's, I love you and I've created something with you that I've invested in and it's important to me.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it's like we have the I love you romantic part, but then we also have the like, this is something we've built together and we care about putting time into it. Like every year we'll have our anniversary dinner. Like we'll go out and we'll have our anniversary dinner. And then we'll talk about like, these are the things I loved about this year. These are the things I didn't like about this year. And then we kind of say like, are you up for another year? Like you want to do this for another year, and it's always like, we just check in, it's like the answer is, for the last 17 years has always been yes, but it's like, we just think it's fun and also important to just like check in and go, how are you feeling about everything? What needs to change for you to be
yeah.
happy? Or, what did you really like that we didn't get to really talk about?
It creates like a safe place for you to bring up anything and everything, either then at the conversation or later on, if you had to bring a conversation, not here to fight with the other person, but rather trying to understand them and understanding yourself so you could make your relationship even better. Yeah. How do you deal with challenges?
We have to really talk a lot about them. We made this commitment to be to each other, even if something was hard or something was like, we didn't want to say it because we were afraid we might hurt the other person's feelings or something like that. We made this commitment to each other because we went through some really difficult times a few years ago, that we were just going to be honest no matter what. And that we were just going to count on each other to be honest, and that we could do that. And it's been really like deepened our bond a lot, because it's like, okay, it would be so easy. And we did this in the beginning of our marriage. We would get into this weird communication dance of like, well, I don't want to say this because I think it might hurt your feelings. So I'm not going to say it, but then I'm going to still feel resentful about it. And then I'm going to be mad that you didn't read my mind and figure it out. And like, we would do that with each other back and forth. And now it's so much better, because when we do have a challenge, we can be like, hey, I didn't like the way that this went. This is how it made me feel. What was going on for you? Like, how are you feeling? Like recently we had, during all this quarantining and stuff like that, it's overall, things have been good for us, and it hasn't caused like tremendous problems in our relationship. Like I'm seeing like, I think that for a lot of people, it's bringing up existing problems and they're having to deal with it because they don't have anywhere to go.
Exactly. Yeah.
And since we dealt with a bunch of stuff a couple years ago when we were going through some difficult times, we didn't really have stuff to deal with. But there was a day where he was like really sleep deprived, and I didn't understand that that's what was going on. So it was really, because it's really important to him, like, keep it together and be reliable and dependable. So he hadn't let me know how exhausted he was. He was just like, no, I'm taking care of things and everything's fine.
Like a
So
man,
then
yeah.
exactly, he was trying to just be be steady and the hero and the protector and the provider and all that stuff. And so he didn't tell me how deeply sleep deprived he was and how he was really struggling. And then it led to this other communication issue where he was trying to say something to me and I was misunderstanding him. And instead of letting me finish saying like, well, this is what it sounds like you're saying to me, he was like, no, wait, stop. I'm not saying that. I'm trying to say this. Then to me, it felt like he was trying to shut me down and not listening to me. And then it just turned into this giant argument. It just turned into this huge argument. And then what happened later was it came out that, he was like, well, I was just really exhausted. For the last 3 nights, I haven't slept and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, well, why didn't you tell me that? Because then I could give you some grace, because I could be like, oh, I get it. You're exhausted. And because that's a thing of like, when you know what's going on, you can give people some grace and you can give people some space, right? You can be like, okay, I know what it's like to be exhausted. You probably didn't mean that. Let's talk. Why don't you take a nap and we'll talk after?
Yeah.
Or why don't you eat something and we'll talk after? You know what I mean? Like we could do that with each other. But yeah, I think that's the two biggest things that help us handle challenges are being really, really honest with each other. And the whole thing about giving each other some grace and some space about like, we're trying to come from a place of like giving each other the benefit of the doubt. Like if you are saying something that upsets me, I'm going to assume you're not intending to upset me. And I'm going to try to figure out what's really going on.
Instead of just making assumptions, it's about asking questions and trying to understand the other person and the situation. So, how do you show love to your spouse? Do you know his love language?
Yeah. So our love languages are totally different. my love language is words of affirmation, and he has two main love languages. They're like very, very close for first. So one is acts of service, and the other one is physical touch. We got into that thing early of like him trying to show me love using his love language instead of mine, and it took me a minute to figure out that he was trying to show me love, and it took me another minute to figure out that the things I thought were no big deal that I would do for him were the things that made him feel loved. So it's like if I would make him some coffee or something like that, that would be like me saying I love you and giving him a giant hug. Like he would really appreciate those little things. Or like if I would like run him a bath, on my way out or something, like I run you a bath or whatever it is, like I picked this up for you on the way home. He would appreciate those things. And to me, they were like kind of just easy throwaway things that I just did because I cared about him and he's on my mind, and to him, they were like huge, things that were like, this is how I know you love me. And so once that I realized that, I started paying more attention to those things. So things like we have this espresso thing and the coffee filter thing on the inside. He always has to clean that out because I always forget. So if I clean that out, he's like, oh my gosh, you cleaned this out. This is so great. Like that's a big deal to him. So I started to pay more attention to those kinds of things because I know that's a love language to him. And to me, mine would be, like I always want to hear him tell me how much he appreciates me or what is special about me to him or those kinds of things. And he would feel like, well, I told you, like I told you that time. So like you
should know that. I love you,
You already know I think you're special. Like we're married.
Yeah. So how has it changed your relationship once you understood that better, or did it make a difference?
Oh, it's made such a difference. It's made such a difference because even like it's made us more willing to give the other person what they want the way that they need it because we're getting what we want the way we need it. So like since he tells me more, that he loves me or what is special about me or what he appreciates about me, those kinds of things, I am more willing to like more conscious of doing those things like the filter or like those kinds of things that I know that are important to him. And I know that it's the same for him. Since I'm doing those kinds of things more, or just going up and hugging him in the middle of something, making time to do that, reach out to him, he's more willing to tell me how much he appreciates that. And you know what I mean? It's like we get
goes both ways. Yeah. Yep.
So that's
so what's the best relationship advice you've ever gotten?
Oh my God. The best relationship advice I ever got was actually from my dad, because my parents divorced when I was 3 years old. And my parents had kind of a contentious custody battle and stuff like that. And there was a lot of like us going back and forth and all these kinds of things. And the best advice I ever got was my dad said to me when I was first getting married, he said, you and Sam are going to fight sometimes. And some of your fights are going to be really big fights. Don't talk to anyone in the family about your fight. Find someone else that you can confide in, because you two are going to make up, but those family members are still going to be mad. It's the best advice ever. You're going to make up, but they will still be angry.
Yeah. And I think it also, besides for what that does, on another level, subconsciously, when you're being really conscious not to speak to someone in the family because you know that you're going to get back together, you really will make sure to get back together. That's what you're going to do. You're like reinforcing it in your brain. Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And what relationship advice would you give to someone who wants to have an extraordinary relationship?
I think the very best thing any of us can do in a relationship is to remember to take care of ourselves. Like, remember that you're still a me, even when you become an us. Because so many times what we do is, when I talk to women about self-care and self-love, and when we do all these things to build up a really strong sense of self and confidence and happiness in themselves, then they always get into a relationship, because that kind of confidence and happiness is really magnetic. And then I always notice about 3 or 4 months in, they stop doing all the self-love, self-care stuff, and they focus in everything on the relationship. So everything is like, we have to do these things together, and how does he feel about this? And they stop taking time to still be themselves, develop their own interests, and just take care of themselves, because they're giving that time that they used to spend taking care of themselves into the relationship. And then what's weird about that is then they start having problems in the relationship, because now it's not about, they're not bringing their strong sense of self to a relationship anymore. They're making somebody else responsible for their happiness, and that person can feel it. And usually you're coming like two people with different personality styles. And it's always like one person who wants to reach out a little bit more, and one person who values independence a little bit more. And my clients tend to be the women who want to reach out a little bit more. And then they attract guys who value their independence a little bit more. So then the more that they pour in, the more he's pulling away. And so then they try to pull in more, because they're like, no, 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 don't, what, let me, and then he's feeling like it's even more clingy and pulling back even more. So it's like, but when they stand in this really strong sense of self and they remember the things that make them special, and they are taking care of themselves, like they're taking care of their health, and they're taking care of their finances, and they're doing whatever their life's work is, and nurturing their other relationships and those kinds of things. When they do those things, they're like this flame, this like beautiful flame. And the flame doesn't wonder like, am I attractive enough? It just stands still and attracts. And so that's the best advice that I can give people, is to really don't stop being a you when you become an us.
It's really important. Yeah. Thank you so much. It was awesome having you on.
Thank you.
Guys, I hope you enjoyed that episode, and subscribe to the podcast. Leave a comment below so I can know what you think. And to book your relationship photo shoot, CJA session, or just to hear more about what we do, go to lifepicksrelationships.as.me. I'm waiting.